Hi and welcome. I'm Jules Muller, founder and CEO of Chicks Connect, and we're super excited today for our first ever Chicks Connect Lunch and Learn. And I just wanted to give a little background about, where this came from. My father had a birthday just a couple of days ago, and I posted something in the Chicks Connect group asking for ideas on how to be a great daughter to an aging parent. I'm not with him right now in the same town. I won't be able to see him until November. So, and from that question, a string of answers, beautiful, wonderful answers, as well as other questions came out from some of the Chicks Connect members. We have a lot of members that have been through this already or are going through it or anticipate going through it. And so I thought, let's have our aging expert, wisdom and aging expert, Davidson, on for Lunch and Learn to help us kind of navigate this, as well as offer any ideas and solutions that she has. And we open this up to all the Chicks Connect members to jump on with us. So we have Allie, who will lead us today, and we also have Sandy. So let's take a minute and let Sandy just tell us who you are, where you're from, and then we'll have Allie take it away.
Okay, I'm Sandy Kralovec, and I live in Canby, Oregon, and I usually go to the Silverton Chicks, but sometimes Wilsonville, sometimes Oregon City, sometimes whatever I can find, because I love chicks so much. My business is I sell wheelie book planners, and I'm interested in this topic because I have a mother who was here for 5 hours yesterday so I could fix her computer, who's in her 80s, and my sister's staying with her, and we're going to soon need to be figuring out what to do, because she's not going to be able to take care of herself by herself forever. So I'm very excited to hear more on this topic.
Excellent, excellent. And Joan just joined us. So Joan, I just did a little brief welcome, but if you'd tell us who you are, where you're from, and maybe if you have anything you want to make sure that you, a question or something that you have for Allie during her presentation, anything that you're interested in.
Well, I'm Joan Lubar. I'm a caffeinated chick here in the Portland area, Westland. And Allie and I have talked many times about this issue. I took care of my former husband, and I still am his power of attorney, and her book was really helpful. So I just wanted to join in and see what you guys had to say.
Great, great. Well, we're so glad you're here. And Joan, as well as Sandy, have both just returned back to the United States from fabulous traveling abroad. So we'll have to do another Lunch and Learn where we just share our travel stories, I think, bringing pictures and things like that. It just, I got goosebumps. So I think that's what we need to do next, is the Lunch and Learn for travelers. So anyway, I will turn it over to you, Allie, and at any point in time, if you need me to pull something up on the screen, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll leave it just like this.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks and welcome. And so, Jules came in and asked me if I would do this. It's been a while since I've taught on this subject. I owned an in-home care agency, for those of you who don't know me, for 9 years. And what I did was I hired and trained caregivers to go into seniors' homes to help them take care of them. And as a result of 9 years of doing this, I learned a lot, obviously. My only experience prior to that was living with my grandmother, and she was the matriarch of our big fat Greek family. So I learned a lot, and when I finally sold it, I thought the one thing that I really wanted people to understand was how important it was to make a plan for your aging years, because we do plan everything in our lives. We plan our day, we plan our vacation, we plan our weddings, we even plan our retirement. But the one thing that we tend to not plan is what might happen and what we want to have done during a time when we start to lose some of our capacities. And so what I found was people would ignore this until a crisis occurred. And then when a crisis occurred, the family would swoop in and they would try to help their their aging parent who in that moment is quite vulnerable, right? Because they've either fallen or they haven't been eating well, they mismanaged their meds, something's happened that's made them vulnerable. But 2 or 3 days or a week or 6 weeks later, they may not be as vulnerable. And now they're going to resist everything that the kids put into place. So this prompted me to write a book called It's Between You and Me, which is more like a manual than it is a book, in that it walks you through 16 questions that as a family, I invite you to sit down and actually go through the book together. It was written in a voice that speaks both to the senior and to the adult children. And it allows for open communication and creating a plan for the aging years. So that's what I did and what I do. And
I'll let people know, if Allie mentions resources or books or anything like that, I'll put the links to those in the YouTube comments or in the description. So if you don't catch everything, I'm taking notes, but if you don't catch it all, just know that everything will be in the description area.
Great. Yeah, and you can find my book on Amazon. So without really knowing what the biggest questions are that you all have, I'm going to make some assumptions. And one is that you probably don't recognize that as we age, we move through developmental stages. Many of you probably as mothers have experienced some of this with your children. So, you go through the developmental stages of childhood and young adulthood. And most recently, whoever the they is, came out and said that there is a developmental stage that seniors go through, and we call it the stage of legacy, which, if you think about it, makes sense. It's a time when the most important thing for them is the relationships that they have and the meaning of their life. So, with that first understanding, I want to share with you some of the unique characteristics of communication of a senior that you are going to run into at some point and that most likely will frustrate you. But having this understanding will actually allow you to help them through their process. And I think that would be a big benefit to you. So there are basically 4 things that you will hear in their communication, or you will see, or you will see in the way they approach things in life. So the first one is a lack of urgency. So as I bring them up, I'm just curious, like if you've experienced this, those of you that are on the call right now, just say, oh yeah, put your hand up so that we know. So this lack of urgency can look like something where you might be asking yourself a question that sounds like, why can't they make a decision? Why can't they make a decision? Everything just takes so much time. Well, the reason is because making quick decisions is not what life is about for them anymore. They're not in a time in their life where there's so much time ahead that they can make quick decisions and move really fast in their lives. There's actually far less time, and they know that on some level. And so they savor every minute of what they have. So it's really more about understanding what has happened and what it all means. And missed opportunities seem trivial or minor, right? So they don't look back the way we do and go, oh God, I shouldn't have said that yesterday. Or, oh man, I should have called that person right away. They don't look at that like that anymore, because those things are minor, trivial pieces of information. And what matters is what was accomplished, not what was missed, which is a different way than what we look at. We tend to look at what we screwed up on, what we missed. Seniors don't do that anymore. They look at, well, what was right, what was accomplished. And it's a really beautiful way to look at things, because they're intuitively realize that life will take care of itself. That's the final piece of it, is that the older we get, the less stressed out we are about things, because we do know that we don't have as much control as we think we do, right? Or as much impact. So that's the first one. The second one is non-linear conversations. And that might sound like you saying to yourself, why can't they stick to the subject? Like you're having a conversation and then they veer off to the left and they veer off to the right.
I kind of do that though.
Well, I do too. But you'll see it more with seniors and in a time when it's really frustrating, like really trying to get something across and they're talking about their neighbor. So these conversations serve the senior in a life review process. So what's happening, it's actually a tool that they are internally using to find purpose or direction or meaning from what they've experienced, which is why they kind of dip into this and dip into that and kind of move all over the place. The personal stories reflect the core values and central themes of a lifetime and help the senior define their legacy. So does that make sense? It's like within those stories is something of meaning that they're actually digging for to find the value of their life and about themselves and the impact they've made. The next one is repetition, and I know everybody's experienced this, and why do they always tell the same story over and over? And that one is probably the most common, and we all repeat stories, right? But we repeat them to kind of brag about them or to bitch about them or sometimes to amuse people or sometimes because it's a problem we're trying to solve. But when a senior repeats a story, the repetition can contain useful information. And again, it's going to be about their personal struggle. So as they tell this story, it's like they're telling it to themselves. They're not really looking for something from you as much as they are doing their own like internal, external auditory process, looking for the nugget. What was the struggle that somehow connects to their full life review? What did they learn? What was it that was difficult that then they can share and make part of their legacy? And then the final one is attention to details. Why do they fret so much about unimportant stuff? Like, where's my shoe? Where's my shoe? Where's my shoe? I need that purse. I have to look for it. And again, the details help the senior to determine what's most important. So it allows them to see something from a little bit different light or time or perspective. And when they're really focusing in on something, it always comes back to this need to create legacy in their life and to find the meaning behind their story, their accomplishment, their experiences, because that's what's left for them to share. And I found that, when I was working with seniors, one of the questions that came up over and over again was, why am I still here? And especially for those who either were losing some mental capacity, but still knew enough that they were losing that capacity, or people who were really suffering physically. And they had spouses that had passed on, sisters and brothers that had passed on, friends that had passed on, and here they are still. And one of the things that I found when I said this to them brought a lot of relief was I said, I believe that we are all here to either share something or receive something. And that as long as we're here, it's because we are not done yet, that we still have something to share or something to receive. And when I would say that to them, they would visibly become relieved because it, number one, tied right into their stage of development where they are seriously looking at their legacy, right? So it is about, what do I share? And it also kind of influenced them to continue to connect with people and build relationships, even though they may have lost some, because there's something they still need to hear and still need to receive. So, any questions so far about legacy and communication?
I like how it's all tying together.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
I heard a definition of that last part of life as completion. The first part is action and activity, and the last part's completion. And I think that fits into exactly what you're saying.
Right.
Just as opposed to legacy, just another version.
Word. Yeah, and when you think about it, it's interesting because as we grow up, everything is always future oriented. Well, not always, I take that back. We have the capacity to live in the past, the present, and the future. And the more life we have ahead of us, the more future oriented we are. We're making goals, we're making plans, right? We've got all this time and we kind of create visualizations and vision boards and all that. But when we get to be in our 80s, late 80s, early 90s, we know intuitively that we're not going to be here forever. And so the future is there's not much of a future for us to be visioning. There's a lot of past, and we will go there in order, again, to find meaning, but it is in the present where they live. And that, as adult children, if we can be there with them, that is probably the most exquisite experience, because we rarely do it. We rarely really and truly live in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And so when you're with somebody who is aging or someone who is perhaps dying, you will find that this is where they live, meaning everything is in tune to what they're hearing and seeing and feeling in the moment. And it's not connected to anything. I think that's one of the most amazing things about spending time with someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's, is that they're so present. If you don't be there with them, you're missing out, is my whole point in that. So as we move through now we've talked about like the way that they communicate and the state that they're in. And then what I want to share with you and what I realized was that if you look at much of advertising that's out there that's directed towards seniors and their adult children, it talks about, helping your senior to remain independent as long as possible. How many of you have heard that?
That or drugs.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so what I feel is the most important thing for us as adult children to help our parents do is to reframe what independence actually means. Because we have skewed it when it comes to seniors and the senior thinks, well, I don't want to be a burden. And if I need your help, then I'm not independent. And that is far from the truth. Because the truth is, all our lives, when we need help, we ask for it. And even if we don't ask for it, people come forward and say, hey, you need help with that dinner party? Hey, you need help to take the kids to the store? Hey, you need help. You know what I'm saying? We help each other. That's who we are. That's part of relationship. And for us to come to a place in our life where we really need assistance and think that is what is going to diminish us in some way does us a great disservice. The truth of what they're really talking about is wanting to make their own decisions, wanting to have control. Mm-hmm. And if you think about independence from the time that we start to strive for it in our twos, that is really what we're striving for, is our own autonomy, the right to make our own decisions, the right to determine what's going to happen next to us, the right to do what we want to do. And so what happens is, as seniors age and they start to lose some mobility, they might start to lose their eyesight or their hearing or even some of their memory. It's at that point that they are afraid that they can't make a decision for themselves anymore. It's not about needing help. It's really about having control. And so the best way that we can help them to maintain that control and to know that it is their decision that we are implementing is by creating a plan for their senior years. It's really about talking about, well, what happens if? At what point will you know it's time to stop driving? And when you've made that decision and these are the things that have to happen in order for that decision to be made, even when it's time to make the decision and you as the adult child pull out this plan and say, Mom, this is what you said, remember? And when you made that decision, you were making that decision from your future for your future self, knowing that at that moment you knew that was the best decision to make, right? And remember when we talked about this and you said this and this has to happen, and then I won't drive anymore. And then we talked about, well, what other options do you have getting around? So you still make the decision about where you're going to go and when you're going to go. And we talked about an Uber, and we talked about a taxi, and we talked about the grandkids and the neighbors. And those options are all still open to you. Which one do you want to use? So you see that having a plan long before the problem starts is key to being able to help them maneuver and navigate as they age, because they will feel losses. It's not just the losses of the people they loved. It's the loss of their abilities to simply get in the car and drive someplace, or to go to a meeting and hear a bunch of noise all the way around in the room and still be able to feel comfortable around that. So there's a lot of things that as we age, we begin to lose. And And yet to be able to say, this is what I want to have happen, and to know who is going to implement that is going to be one big piece that will allow them to feel a sense of control. Make sense?
So if they have a hard time making decisions, but they want to make decisions, how long is appropriate for us to wait for them to make a decision versus, I think there's like I'll speak for myself, but I know it's like, if we don't decide these things or make this plan, I'm fearful that I might not make the right choice for them if there comes a time where they can't make that choice or something, right? You know, so
right, which
so
is
what's the amount of time that's acceptable? And then, hi Don, welcome to our call. Just to let you know, we are recording this, and so it will go up on YouTube. But so Don has joined us from Salem, Oregon. So go ahead, Allie.
So there is no real answer to that question of like, what's the amount of time? The better answer, rather than the time, is to continue to have the conversation and give them options. In the end, and being honest about what your fear is. So here's the thing that I found in working with seniors is that there are very few seniors who are unwilling to have these conversations. In fact, most of them want to have these conversations. It's their adult children who don't want to have the conversations, right? And the reason is because as adult children, having these conversations takes us to the reality that we're going to lose our parents someday, and we just don't want to deal with that ourselves, right? But they already are dealing with the fact that they know, I probably have 5 years or 10 years at the most left. What's going to happen to me? And so that's going to be a key thing. Now, where I want to go with this next, and it might answer some of your questions, is how to prepare yourself to have this conversation with your parents. So there's a little ebook that I created. It's called Before We Talk, which I'll make available at the end of this thing. And it goes into a lot of detail about how to do what I'm referencing here. But I'm going to briefly touch each of the 3 points. So the first thing that we as adult children need to do is to change the nature of the relationship we have with our parents from a parent-child relationship to a peer-to-peer relationship. Because we know that we are more apt to listen to the suggestions of a peer than we are to the suggestions of our child. Right? I mean,
and vice versa.
And vice versa, right. And so that's part of the very first thing that really needs to happen. And the way that you can do that is to look at how you developed friendships and start to act that way with your parent. Start talking to them the way you would talk to a friend. Share with them the things that you would share as a friend. Because otherwise what happens, which is really unhealthy, it's a great disservice, and I know you've heard these words before, is that we parent our parents. And that is the worst thing that we can do. Because in doing that, we're basically forgetting that regardless of what they can remember of their past or what physical capacities they have, they are still adult people who have had a lifetime of decision making and control that we are treating them suddenly they don't have. And so they're going to resist and resent and push back on every suggestion we have if we are coming to them as the child. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Totally.
The second thing that needs to happen in us is that if we have had, and I know I did, a childhood that was less than perfect, in which there were some wounds that got left inside of us, in our inner child, that we are still working out and that we are still triggered with our parents, it is up to us to get the help that we need to move through that, to parent our own inner child and to forgive our parents, because who they are today is not who they were then. And who we are today is not that powerless child that we used to be. And so I had several situations in which here was this sweet old man in front of me who my caregivers absolutely adored and took care of. And the daughter would come and visit and she would be so mean. And my caregivers would call and say, why is she so mean? She is such a bitch. And I'd be like, hey, you have no idea what that relationship was like growing up. And it may very well be that she's still carrying a lot of anger because that sweet old man might have been a very abusive father. So it really, in order for you as the adult child to really be there for your parents as they age and through their death process, it behooves you to work on that inner child and heal those wounds. Because I'll tell you what, people as they have been with their parents as they died, and I served over 1,000 families. I never had a single one of them, even those who had terrible relationships with their parents, ever say to me at the end when their parent died that they regretted being there for them at the end. Every one of them said, this was amazing. This was very healing. And so you don't want to miss that opportunity to be there with them at the end of their lives. And then the last one, of course, is what I just shared to you initially, was reframing independence, so that they get that the amount of help you give them, the assistance you give them, has nothing to do with whether or not they get to make their own decisions and have control in their lives. They always have control. It's always up to them. And there's a part in us that has to let go. So I had a client once who was very upset because his father used to be a contractor, and he found him up on a ladder cleaning the gutters on a 2-story building. And he said, I screamed and yelled at him, and he was just so upset. And I said, can you recall that moment when you looked up at your dad and he was doing this? What was his demeanor? What was on his face? And he goes, oh, he had a big smile on his face. And I said, yeah, and you want to take that away? To protect him from what? Well, from falling and killing himself. Yeah, well, that's the next best thing that's going to happen to these people. And that's what we as adult children have to know. The next great adventure is their death, as crazy as that sounds. So we are never going to be able to avoid that or prolong that or change the fact that that's the next great adventure for them. But we can really make their last few years here on the planet really crappy if we take away their joy because of the fear that it might hurt them. It's a point at which we have to stand back and say, is this for me or for them? Right? Makes sense. Hard to hear. I know. So how are we doing for time?
We're doing well. If you have a couple more points, or we could open it up to stories or questions from the participants, because everyone has a story. So,
right. I have one last thing that I was going to have you post, and it was just the 10 parameters of discussing elder care with your parents. So if I could just briefly go through those, I won't take a lot of time, but then you'll have the paper to go into the detail.
Perfect.
So I use parameters, and actually, Julie, this is, from all the work I've done with you. Acronyms are really, really great. So it's an acronym. So the P starts for partnership, which we talked about, not parenting your parents, but creating a real partnership relationship with them. The A stands for approach. So it's really up to you to approach all the conversations with an open mind and heart, and recognize that any preconceived ideas or assumptions or judgments, you just need to put those aside, heal any old barriers so that you can truly be present in the moment in the relationship. R is the reframe that we talked about. Start with understanding needing independence doesn't mean you don't need help. A is ask. So this is really important, is that remember that in this conversation, your job is always to ask questions, not give answers. If you can go into the conversation that way, it's going to make a big difference. And then let them control the cadence, the speed, and the solutions of this conversation. So ask questions using what, where, when, how, and who, but not why. Why takes us to our deep-seated beliefs, and that's where we need to defend. So stay away from that. And then also use softeners in your openings, statements such as, I'm wondering, or have you considered, or I'm curious about, so that it just leaves it open for them. M is the motivation. So really sit down with yourself before you have this conversation and ask yourself, what is your motivation? If you're angry and frustrated or stressed out, this conversation is not going to end well. So you really need to be to be motivated and have your intention be things about safety and well-being, quality of life for both of you, looking for an outcome that's going to be rewarding for both of you. E is experience. I found that when you use experience, either your experience or that of a friend, whether that friend is fictional or not, it's a softener in itself. So in other words, you could say something like, oh, my friend's father broke his hip and is in the hospital, and my friend has to make all these decisions for him, and is really unsure what to do. And I'm not sure I know what you would want me to do. If that happened to you, can we talk about it? So by using somebody else, it's a secondary thing. You're actually drawing their attention away from you and giving them the opportunity to think about having that conversation with you. In addition, one of the things, this isn't in here, but it's also important, is that when you're asking somebody a question that is really going to be targeted and very important to them to answer, you might not want to, or hard or difficult, don't look at them when you ask the question. Look away from them, slightly to the right or left of them, and then when you're done and you've asked the actual question, don't look at them right away. Give them time to compose themselves in their private world and find the answer for themselves that they're going to share with you. T is for timing. Be sure that it's right for both of you. You shouldn't be rushed. Make sure that it's a place that's free of distractions and other people, and it's private and relaxed, because timing is everything for seniors. Educate. E, educate yourself about what's available. So, Julie, I think we lost you.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you. We just lost the video.
Yeah,
there you are.
The whole thing just kind of turned black. It was really weird.
Okay, you're fine.
So I just turned it off and back on again.
Okay, cool. Almost done. So educate about what's available out there, so that when you go into this conversation, you actually have some resources. R is for resistance. Expect that you're going to have some resistance from your parents, and it's only there when they're afraid. So your job is to make them feel as safe as possible. When you let it be anything they say, okay, we don't have to make a decision today. We're not rushing anything. These are just inquiries. They're less apt to be resistant. And then finally, S is for suspend. So be watchful of signs of overwhelm. If you start to see in them that it's just too much, just say, you know what, this is good. We'll come back to it, talk about it another time. Just let it be and step away from it. Don't force it to a conclusion at that time. Okay? So, questions?
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the one thing that I just want to say really quickly in the forced or overwhelm. So working as a professional organizer, I worked with a lot of senior people, a lot of senior clients, and each one of the items that they had to make a decision on carried 80, 70 years of stories behind it. And so making that many decisions during a condensed period of time is overwhelming. It's also dehydrating. So we didn't kind of talk about the physical aspect of it, but having a lot of water when you have these discussions, some power bars or some peanuts or some healthy type of snack, because all of that emotional energy also takes a toll physically. So I just kind of wanted to mention that.
That's brilliant. Yep. Thank you.
I have something. How about how to approach your kids to have this conversation?
I love it. Yeah. So,
can you hold on one? Take somebody else's question. Somebody just rang at my door.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. Sandy, you have any question?
Not really. I kind of jumped on Amazon and looked at your book. I was going to say that might be the answer to Joan's question, is have the kids read the book and start that. I don't know. I don't really have a question because I'm not really quite there yet, though I do know I really took it to heart when you talked about how to talk to your parent, because I get frustrated with her and I talk to her different than I would talk to another old lady. I'm not quite as compassionate with her sometimes, which I thought about that when you said that. I went, and I'll go, Mom.
Yeah, and
So
I mean
was
that's typical, right? That's true in all relationships. The closer the relationship is, the more triggered we are. The further the relationship is from us, the less triggered. I mean, somebody could be a real jerk to me and I don't know them, and I might get annoyed in the moment, and then I'm going to forget all about it. But if it was one of my kids, now it's become really big, right? Because of the nature of the relationship. And I would just say too that a lot of times people have said what you've said, and I don't discredit it, but that well, we're not quite there yet. And the thing is, you never know when you're going to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
and
true.
So you think, well, my mother's 84 years old and she's really healthy. The truth of it is, we did her plan 8 years ago. Now, has it shifted and changed? Absolutely. She visits it over and over. And what the interesting part about that is, what I have found as a result is it actually helps her with her legacy review. Because she goes back and goes, oh yeah, I said I wasn't doing, but maybe I don't want to do it.
Okay, so this gave me a question then.
Sure.
I guess I said we're not there yet because my mother is not open to making a plan. She doesn't think she's old enough yet.
Okay.
So I guess I haven't started any conversations. Well, there's been some small ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, how do I let my mom know we need to sit down and do some planning?
So for your mom, my example of using somebody else's experience is great. For some people, you can come forward and say, you know that things are changing for you, and I'm really concerned because I don't know what to do for you as things change, and I want to make sure that it's your decisions that are implemented. And so can we have this conversation? I could do that with my mother because my mother is real open to that. But if my mother wasn't,
right,
then I would do what I suggest. I would go to her and say, God, this friend of mine, her mom just fell and broke her hip, and now she has to go into a little facility, and she's all frustrated and scared, and use this other thing. And it really got me thinking about, anything could happen, and I don't know what you want me to do, and I want to make sure that whatever I do is yours. It's yours, not me. It would make, and if they were like, oh, well, don't worry about it. Well, okay, I mean, I get it. So maybe you trust me to make those decisions. But here's the thing. I would feel really guilty if I did something and it turned out to be the wrong decision. I don't want that responsibility.
Right. Okay.
It would really be hard for me
that
to do.
That does help using.
Yeah,
it helps using the third party.
And
really
not just that, Sandy, I think it's so important. I mean, I'm really healthy, but I'm 76. So, and this is something that I've been wanting to do with my kids and just haven't taken the time to do it. And I've mentioned it to them, but I will say that one of my kids was like, oh, Mom, we don't have to worry about that. You're in such good shape, or whatever. He did not want to deal with the idea of death and or of my getting really ill. But my daughter-in-law's mother just broke her arm. And that, these things just happen. She was in a parking lot and tripped over something. So it doesn't matter what your age is.
Right. And Joan, you can actually use John as an example. You can say to your son, hey, look, your dad has been losing his memory for quite a long time. And although, it didn't happen overnight, but hey, he's living with this for a long time. And so now I have had to make lots of decisions for him, which have been really, really hard for me. And I don't want you to have to do that for me. So to answer your question, to be sensitive to the fact that, hey, look, I know you don't want to think about me not being here. And I am not having this conversation with you because I think that something's going to happen. The reason I want to have this conversation is because I like having control of my life. And I like being able to make my own decisions. And I know from my experience with your dad and with other people who I know who've had this experience that if you and I don't have this discussion about what I want to have happen if and when something changes, then you're going to have to make that decision. And, I may bitch and yell the whole way. I may resist you all along, and it's going to make things harder on you. So this is really a gift to me if you would be willing to sit down and help me to design this plan. And you know what may come out of it? In the book, I have you do actually both the family members who may be the ones who are going to implement your plan, and you do what I call the baseline. So it's an opportunity for you to put down everything you want, you like, you believe in, you're everything that you are today. And then they get to do the same thing so that you can look at it. And for one thing, it gives you a baseline so that 10 years from now, if something shifts, they can actually go back to your baseline and go, wow, okay, mom really isn't remembering this. Because as we age and when we're close with our family, it's not as visible as it is to people who are far away. Right. Yeah. And so, because we're kind of growing, we're in the pot that's boiling together.
Right. Well, that's why, people always say, oh, your kids are so big now. Well, I see them grow every day, but they don't see them for years on end or whatever. So
exactly. Yeah. So that's the way to approach your children about having that conversation, is that it's really helpful to you. They're doing it for you, even though you're also doing it for them, so that they don't feel guilty or burdened. The burden, you can make it clear. The burden of helping me as I age is not about the physical part of caring for me. The burden is about making those decisions. There is nothing more burdensome than making a decision for somebody else without knowing if that's what they want. That's a horrible thing, right?
Before I left for this trip, which was 3 weeks, and it was a long trip, and I had actually pulled a muscle in my back before I left and all this stuff, and who knew what was going to happen. I actually sat down and I wrote out a list that I needed to do before, really, of all the bank accounts, all the passwords, where to go for things. And I kept coming up with more things that I really hadn't even thought about. It was like, oh, I got to go back and add that to my list. And I think that's one of the things that's really important to have from our parents.
Right. Yeah, I actually I have that too. It's called the My Life Portfolio. And what it is just a book full of questions for seniors to answer that include things like, what are the passwords? Where's your bank accounts? Who's the vet for your dog? Who's
How many storage facilities do you have hidden around town that we don't know about?
Exactly.
Till we see them on Storage Wars or something, right?
Right. Yeah. And so, that is because that was one of the things that, again, I noticed, and as an organizer, you probably have seen this too, is that families come in after the person has passed away, and the stress. Now you've just lost somebody you love, but on top of that, you now have to go through years worth of stuff. You don't know where anything is. It's very frustrating. And the other thing that I found is that in giving this to your parents to start filling out, it actually helps them with their life review, because once again, they're going into their past, like, oh yeah, the vet, the dog. Oh, remember when we had that dog that we did da. And then it asks them, like, who are your friends? Because I don't know all my mother's friends and what their phone number. How would I know who to call? It's a different world we live in. We don't grow up and stay in the same community anymore. So
right. Now, Dawn, I think you're on mute, but do you want to unmute and ask Allie or anyone else any questions? I don't know if you're hearing us, if you're still with us.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect.
I'm just outside. I didn't want to cause a lot of noise, but I don't have any. I'm not thinking of any specific questions.
Great. Well, tell us who you are and where you're from, so the ladies know.
Sure. There's a motorcycle driving by, so hang on a second. So I'm Don. I'm down here in Salem. My folks are aging and dealing with issues. I'm fortunate that they're both pretty proactive in thinking about things, but they're also getting to a point where they need some help and they're resistant. And the latter story was very familiar to me. Not quite as extreme, but
Yeah.
I did catch my mom on a ladder with my dad holding it. It's like, I can change a light bulb or whatever it is, just let me know. So it's just having some of those conversations.
Yeah.
I'd be the one to climb the ladder. I would absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And I have gotten, my kids have gotten, Mom, what are you doing? And, and I'm doing what I want to do, and now I'm learning to ask for help for certain things. But you know what? I like to do those things. And as long as I can, I want to do them. So,
So I'm reminded of when my children were not small, but younger. They were in their teens, and they would say, Mom, can we go to this party? Right. And I never wanted to tell my kids what to do. I really wanted them to learn to think for themselves. And so I would simply say, okay, here's my concern. There might be some alcohol there. And if there is, it might get out of control. And if it does, the cops are going to show up and you're going to get an MIP. And if you get an MIP, it will affect your entrance into college. So you get to decide whether or not that risk is worth it. If it is, go. If you think, well, it's not really worth it, but I'm going to go, and if it shows up, I'll get out of there because I can, now that I know what could possibly happen, I will make that decision at the time. In the end, I have to trust them. So the same is true with my parents. Now, if I find my mother on a ladder and I say to her, Mom, what the hell are you doing? Get down from there. That's dangerous. I'm essentially saying, Mom, you're too old to do this anymore. You're stupid for making this decision, and you better listen to me. Right? Yep. Versus if I come in and go, whoa, you're on a ladder. I don't even know if I'd be on a ladder at my age. Are you okay if you fall down and break a hip? Will that be okay with you? And she would go, well, no. And I'm like, then why are you taking a chance by putting yourself at risk in this way? I mean, it is, we all do that, but I will heal a lot faster than you will. Right? So I'm not going to get on a ladder like that. And if she says, oh, yeah, hey, something's got to kill me, which might be my response too, actually. They're like, hey, people say to me, how could you drive like that? Or how can you, I used to smoke. How could you smoke? And I'd say, hey, something's got to kill me. So leave me alone until I wanted to make a different decision. So it's more about, again, telling the concept, hey, you're kind of taking a risk up there. Is that what you want? Have you thought about that? Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, well, I'm here. I can help you.
Right. Or you can hold the ladder.
Yeah. What can I do to support you so you can do what you need to do in a way that's safe for you? So again, it's just kind of like, we're so quick to jump in and go, don't do that, both with our children and with our parents. And yet there's another way you can do it where you really put it back in their lap. Now, obviously, if they are unable to make a good decision for themselves, then that's not going to work. If they're already in the throes of Alzheimer's, reminds me of a client I had who lived on a farm and he found the tractor keys and got on the tractor and was driving. And I had the caregiver on one phone call and the daughter who lived in Portland, this was in Bend, on the other saying, get him off, he's going to kill himself. And in the meantime, he's got a smile from ear to ear and he's so happy that finally the caregiver is like, oh my God, I've never seen him so happy. He just crashed it into the pond. And his daughter is like, it's okay, let him have it. It's making him happy. So, something's got to kill you.
Something's got to kill you. We're all on the same path.
Joy, it's all about your own personal belief system around death, right? Yeah. So
wonderful. Well, thank you. So anything else that you'd like, any other questions for Allie? I have 2 documents that you've shared with me that I will share in our Chicks Connect members only Facebook group so that you have those. I will also download this and then upload this to YouTube. So if you forgot and wanted to rewatch, or if anyone not on here wants to watch, we can do that. And then I'll post the link to Allie's book as well. So we have that. And then you also do some coaching. Do you want to tell us about that?
Well, I haven't coached around this subject for quite a while. And it may just be that at the time, the timing wasn't there. And now it is, I don't know. I am open to doing some group coaching in which I would go into much more depth about how to create that plan with your parent and why each of the questions that I have in the book is so important, and a little bit about how to do self-care as a caregiver for yourself, and also more about adverse behaviors. So adverse behaviors are something that you will see as someone ages, especially if they have some kind of form of dementia, but you'll also see it without that. And understanding what that adverse behavior is an indicator of is really helpful. So I'm happy to do that. If I have enough people that are interested, I would do like a 6-week, and we could do it on a Zoom or whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I have enough people, at least 5 who are interested in something like this, reach out to me on Facebook, or my email is alliedavidson7@gmail.com, and we'll put something together for you.
Perfect.
How's that?
Sounds great. Sounds
Okay.
great. So we'll put Allie's email as well as her Facebook page. So if you're watching the replay of this, you'll be able to connect with her right away with specific questions about her coaching program, or questions about her book, or how to hire her for maybe a one-on-one consultation before you step into that conversation with your aging parents or aging loved ones. Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Do we have any final comments from anyone else, or final questions?
Thank you, Allie. As
Thank you,
always,
Allie.
have a great deal of wisdom.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you.
Super helpful.